record. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. So week 4, March 20th of Get Motivated, Get Focused online. So last week we really worked with that top 5, bottom 20 concepts. So taking a binary viewpoint of each of those, that list of 25 goals to get to our top 5. This is a really great way of prioritizing as you get clearer and clearer on what your top 5 are. Today we're going to spend some time being able to, it's great that we've talked about goals, it's great that we've written down goals, but now it's about taking action on those goals and what does that action step look like. So we're going to talk a little bit about what planning looks like today. But before we begin, I wanted to be able to debrief any of the homework. So, on the Q&A, Kyle and I talked about prioritizing and kind of what to do once you get to your top 5, and asking yourself, in between the goals of what's most important. So is anybody still struggling with, being able to complete that exercise, didn't get to their top 5, or do most people feel comfortable with what their top 5 are? Okay. So I see some head nodding. Awesome. Any surprises for any of you? Like anybody get to a top 1 and think, ooh, I didn't think that was originally going to be my top 1. Anybody? So I think I shared with you guys about how my top 1 wasn't even on my original list. So I wanted to be able to concentrate on everything, but changing some of the habits. So it was interesting, and then some of my shoulds, were able to come off my list, and then just get really clear about kind of the order sequence. That sometimes if I had too many goals going on at once before, I would get just overwhelmed and end up doing nothing with it. It would be like analysis paralysis, right? This way it gives you really clear direction of, okay, so those are my top 5. And then, like I said, tonight we're really going to be talking about the planning for action. So I just want to make sure that nobody's got any questions before I move on. I think we were all clear. There was some, I received a question through email that had asked, what happens if you end up having tied goals? Two competing, what you felt like were priorities. How do you distinguish which one comes first and which one comes second? Sometimes it ends up being that it's a personal question that you have to ask yourself of which one comes first, and which one comes second. It sometimes, and I think I talked about this on the Q&A too, it's not that we just ignore and throw out, even though Warren Buffett would tell us to throw out the rest of the 20. It's not that we do, and you'll still be kind of working on some of those other 20 simultaneously. Some of them might actually get achieved as a result of you focusing on your top 5, but it's just to really honestly reflect, where do those fall into order? And so sometimes when they're competing, it might be 5, 6, it might be, 1, 2, and then, your 5, 6 are pretty close. So don't get caught up in being able to figure it all out. Like I said, and like I had encouraged last week, I wanted you to go through the prioritizing exercise and then come back to it in a couple of days and ask yourself again, is that really my number 1? Is that really my number 2? Is that my number 3? And so on. And you're going to do the same thing. If you're finding that you're struggling to be able to take the actions that we plan out, you're going to want to come back and revisit and be able to ask yourself, why did this end up being my number 1 goal? What was the connection that I had when I placed it in the number 1 position? To kind of reprioritize again. And sometimes it might change, right? Your perception might change, circumstances might change where it does take a different position. Either that, or you remind yourself about why it was number 1 and then be able to refocus. Awesome. Good. Okay, so what comes next? And that's about the plan. Okay, so really a goal is just a wish without a plan. So it's not enough to know what the priority is. it's got to be all about taking action. I read a lot, but I would get a new book and be really excited about the concepts and the theories it was going to teach me. I'd have the best of intentions to read the book. I put it on my to-do list to read the book. I put it on post-it notes to read the book. And until I actually read the book wasn't going to read itself. So it's got to be about taking action. And we need to plan for action. So if you recall, when we were going through those goal models, the GROW model and the SMART model, I had said to you when you were writing your list for the top 5, bottom 20, it wasn't important to get into specifics and details. And it's because the specifics and the details need to come in the action steps. We need to be exactly clear about where we're going. If you didn't plan and get specific about your vacation, chances are you wouldn't be going very far, right? So this is where the details and the specifics count. It's when we've got kind of a step-by-step or a map of that direction, it's also how we continue to motivate ourselves to move forward. It's in celebrating those little action steps or kind of the different, measure marks on that plan for anybody that loves checklists and loves to check them off, especially maybe not doing up the list, but at least putting the check mark next to it, you get a nice little endorphin release, and then you also get a sense of accomplishment. And accomplishment is one of those things that can alter our state to help us continue to stay motivated. So when you're working on plans, even having the smallest detail step, it's about celebrating as we go along, celebrating to keep us motivated, celebrating to keep us focused. And you'll talk, or sorry, as I've got things going on here. If you remember in that Charles Duhigg habit loop, we talked about the reinforcement of that reward, right? So if we celebrate along, we can be able to strengthen that habit loop to help us continue to do the behaviors we need to in order to accomplish our goals. We talked about being able to have a connection, an emotional connection to our goal. And sometimes when it's a really large goal, if we can break it down to piecemeal or bite-sized pieces, we can continue to focus on being able or striving to be able to accomplish that. So Tony Robbins really has this kind of what he would call a process to being able to achieve your goals when he talks about planning. And so part of what I'm going to talk to you tonight is a little bit from that, but it's more been adapted that, and Christopher Lawrence and I did this workshop of being able to really simplify those steps to get down to a good planning process. We talked about the 8% that are successful with New Year's resolutions, and we talked about how they get absolutely clear. And so, with that, you're going to want to be able to take your number one goal, and you're going to want to ask yourself, what do you want? What's the outcome of the goal? What is it that you want? And it's about getting into those really detailed, specific feelings and emotions and details so that you get a clear picture, almost like visualizing in your mind to get clear. And another good question to ask is the why do you want it? So Simon Sinek, he wrote a book called Start With Why. It's a very popular business book, but for personal goal achievement, as well, to be able to really ask yourself why. And writing down your why into the details of your plan. So, I want to be able, and for me, it had to be a stronger why than because it's good for me, right? Okay, so my goal is to quit smoking. Why? Because yeah, it's good for me, but that wasn't enough, because otherwise I would have quit years ago, right? It couldn't be enough that it was detrimental to my health. My why needed to go deeper. So I needed to get really clear about what that looked like, what it was going to feel like when I had quit smoking, what my health state was going to be, how clear my skin would be, all of that stuff. But my why really started to dig into, I wanted to be able to run. I wanted to be able to play with my kids. I wanted to be able to do that without feeling out of breath. I didn't want to be ashamed or having to hide my habit, or the disappointment and having to quit over and over again. So my why had to go deeper. It had to get emotional. Then he starts to, Tony would talk about, and this is part of what I've already said, is, what massive action can you take to be able to accomplish this goal? So what's the massive action, right? And for me, and I'll just stay with the theme of quit smoking because it's an easy example that I think that everybody can kind of apply the same kind of theory to in their plan. The massive action was to get rid of all of the paraphernalia. So to get rid of all of the smokes, to get rid of all of the lighters, to get rid of all, it was massive cleaning out action. I don't know, for some of you that are connected with me on Facebook, every year I'm not religious, but I participate in spiritual practices, and I participate in Lent. And Lent is usually when you surrender or give up something that's self-serving, and in place of being able to allow room for new things to come into your life. And so this year I gave up consumerism, which has been interesting and challenging, and I've learned an awful lot about myself. But it was massive action, was to really commit to not spending any money outside of basic needs. And so I was going to have to get really creative if I wanted to get my hair done, if I wanted to get my nails done, because I really like doing that. And part of it is my self-care practice. I was going to have to get creative of how I was going to raise the money to be able to earn those kind of rewards, or that kind of or participate in those activities for my self-care. So we purged through 2 rooms. I put them on garage sale. The kids kind of went crazy. They did their own stuff. So what massive action can you take to be able to start to set the path towards your goal? And I cannot emphasize about being able to celebrate every step. It's even if the action doesn't work, even if you do it and you still end up, you end up buying that one thing that isn't out in your basic needs, or it ends up being a kind of a dead end, right? Especially if you've got any goals that require you to be, to research or to go ask questions from a subject matter expert, or go find out how to be able to do something. Even if that action leads you to a dead end, all good. It was all good learning. So celebrate it anyways. The point is that we took and we take continual action towards those steps. And I would say, even if the action doesn't really feel fluffy and good, right? I did not wake up in the morning doing cartwheels over, yay, quit smoking. That's not how I felt. I was pretty miserable, asked my family, for the first little bit. But it was about continuing just to step forward and continue to take action and continue to move in a forward direction towards my goal. Really important, and we'll dive more into this next week, but we also need to think about what obstacles are going to come into play. So what are the barriers between you and your goal? Are those self-driven fears? Are they lack of resources? You don't have time. It's going to require, full dedication on something or sacrifice of something. Is it going to require somebody else's commitment? So there's a number of challenges that we'll talk about next week, and we'll be able to dive into about our obstacles, but really start in your plan. You should really have the list of obstacles that are potential, and then your plan to be able to overcome those. How are you going to overcome them? And start to put in your mind frame already prior to next week of the solution focus. So we start with our why, and when we ask our brain how, our brain will go find us the answers. It's just about asking ourselves, how do I do this? How do I overcome this? How do I get there? The other key to achieving your goals is to notice what you're getting. So to notice the rewards that are coming as you're going along, as you're starting to accomplish some of those steps, as you're starting to take some action, and be able to stay on course. Now, planning always has to have some sort of flexibility in it. And I think that that's important. Be stubborn about your goal, be flexible about your plan. So it's kind of those cliche quotes of, if plan A doesn't work, there's plan B, plan C, whatever. It's about evaluating what works, what doesn't work, and tweaking your plan as you go. So if you're going along and continuing to feel resistance, not getting any further ahead, meeting a bunch of dead ends, we're celebrating those actions anyways, but then we're going to retweak the plan as we go along so that we're making sure that we're staying on course, and know that there's a number of ways to get there. And then let disappointment drive you. So we're conditioned as a society of, well, that didn't work, so I give up, right? I tried, good enough, right? Or, what happens if I try and I try again and I try again and it still doesn't work, right? It's about letting that feeling of disappointment drive you beyond, right? I had a really good mentor in my life that said, if you want something that you haven't had before, you're going to have to do a whole lot of things that you haven't done before. And nothing grows in comfort. So a little lobster, when it's ready to go through a growth spurt, that shell that it's in gets rather tight and rather uncomfortable. It's got to let go of that shell and in order to get uncomfortable in order to grow into a new shell. And so I had to be willing to become uncomfortable. I had to be willing to go through some challenging times or failure or whatever that looked like to be able to achieve my goals. And then, like I had already said, and we will cover off, before the end of these sessions is, so when do you just know when to quit a goal, right? Like when do you just, like, you're so off course, or the course isn't working, or the goal isn't achievable right now, and you've got to change that top 5 priority. What do you do with those goals? And is it time to quit, or is it time to table? And so we'll be able to go through some of those too. So like I said, your plan needs to be all about taking that action, getting really clear on what that action is, being emotionally connected to that action, and setting yourself up for success. But when success doesn't happen, to help you continue to drive forward. Does anybody have any questions about that so far? Does anybody want to volunteer to go through your number 1? It's an opportunity to be able to really start to go through planning out your next steps when it comes to achieving your number 1. Any volunteers? Don't all raise your hand or unmute yourself at once.
I'll go. So I'm Christy.
Hi.
So my number 1 is to master cold calling. I absolutely strongly dislike it, but it's become reality for me.
Yep.
That has become my number 1 goal.
Okay. And so when you talk about cold calling, metrically, what does that look like? Is that once a day? Is that 6 times?
Well, so in my industry, there's Mondays and Fridays are out. And then personally for me, Tuesdays are not good. So my days are Wednesdays and Thursdays, and I've blocked off time in my calendar.
Good. How much
So
time in your calendar have you blocked off?
I've blocked off an hour each on Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
So I do my prospecting of who, like my lists of, I have my certain categories of lists that I'm building, and I have written scripts for each one.
Nice.
And so I prospect on Wednesdays and Thursdays between 10 and 11 a.m.
Okay. And so how many calls do you think that you can accomplish in an hour?
Well, if people don't answer, I can do a lot. If people answer, it can
So
be a couple.
do you have a minimum threshold?
I want to talk to 5 people a week.
Okay. Okay. How many people are on your list of categories?
I have about 70 people.
Okay. Good. And so what do you really want to come of this?
I just want to have the opportunity to be able to meet with the prospect that I'm targeting,
Okay.
to see if there's any opportunity for us to work together, do business,
Okay.
or just to have a new contact. If sometimes, basically, every time you cold call and you get an acceptance, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them to see if there's compatibility. So the outcome is to generate a meeting and to see where it goes from there.
Okay, so of those 5 a week, is that the 5 meetings you want a week?
No, it's getting in touch with people. Sometimes so I will follow with someone for a month,
Okay.
and I will try them for a month. If I'm not successful in getting them or engaging them in a meeting, then I do drop them off.
Okay. And so when you follow them a month, is that a follow-up every week?
If they don't answer, I call them every week, and I will start to leave a message in week 3.
Okay.
But I don't want to leave a message right away.
How come?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. It's just something to think about, right? Of being able to be clear with what your intention is and to offer them an opportunity to reach back out.
In my experience, they tend not to, and they delete it. So I prefer to catch them.
Yeah.
And I mark what time I tried them, and I try them at a different time the next time or a different day.
Good. And so you touched on this a little bit of the why. What does this personally do for you, Christy?
It helps grow my business.
Okay.
And in turn, I'm hoping to help grow theirs.
Okay. Are you emotional about that?
About growing my business?
Yeah.
Yes, very.
Good. And so what I would recommend with that goal is that when you get to your why, get really clear on that why, but write out a why statement for yourself. And sometimes what I do is that like I've got metrics too that I follow in my practice, right? That there's so many new clients that I want to be engaged with in strategy sessions, and I've got my conversion rate as well that I want to be able to follow. So when I get really specific about, because I don't get excited about numbers, like I don't, like I'm just not a numbers person. I'm passionate about growing my business, and I'm passionate about being able to impact people's lives. I want to help people change their lives. So my why statement is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's on Post-it notes. It's on my screensaver. It's on my phone. So that way, when I'm asking myself, what do I need to do today? That becomes the priority, right? My why statement reminds me what my priorities are. When I really don't feel like doing it, or in your case, Christy, when nobody returns the calls or everybody's phone screening, it's the why you keep going through the list. Why you commit to getting through the 70. Why you commit to, if that means following up with the 70 for the next month, right? To be able to, so I suggest putting a why statement together for yourself. Okay, so what's the first step then? So it sounds like you've got some mapping out. So have you started these cold calls on Wednesdays, Thursdays?
I have not. I'm not procrastinating. Things have come up, but it's starting next week right now, doing contacting for an event. So it's a different type of calling. I'm calling with a benefit, not that my other type of calling is not for a benefit, but that's a harder sell than saying, hey, we'd like to invite you to a free presentation. You'll learn, you'll take away some tools and solutions that you can directly apply to your business. So that's an easier sell.
Absolutely.
And the list of, there's a fair amount of my prospects that I am reaching out for the event.
Okay. So, so what you're saying to me is that you're going to begin going through that list of prospects, doing this cold calling for your event. You're going to start doing that on March 29th at 10 a.m.
No, tomorrow.
Oh,
Tomorrow morning. Oh yeah.
even.
Oh no, that starts right away. I have an event April 6th, so that starts.
Yeah, so you can't start next week. You're starting.
Yeah, no, I have different categories. I don't want to break down the different buckets that I have, but I'm basically, some of the list that I have built is going towards inviting for this event.
Okay. And so how many people are you inviting tomorrow?
I don't know. However many, I guess, answers. I'm just going to sit and start calling in the morning. I have about a half an hour before I have to leave for BNI. So, and in my market, basically my mornings are the best time to call. So if I don't have the opportunity in the morning, calling in an afternoon is actually futile.
Okay. And so if you were to put a minimum would be what? 1? Because you might have an awesome conversation.
Sure, if I have an awesome conversation, then I have 1. If not, I can continue. But the ones that I'm leaving, the calls I'm making it will be leaving messages.
Okay. Okay, so a minimum of 1 conversation to happen tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
Before you have to be able to go for BNI. Okay. And so in the specifics of your planning, what I really suggest, guys, is that, and it sounds trivial, but it's part of that habit loop and part of that habit ingraining is, do you know which phone you're going to use, Christy?
I have 1 phone in my life.
Okay. So do you know the room that you're going to be in? Okay, in your office, in your chair. Do you have a script for that call?
Basically,
like notes that you want to be able to go over those details.
It's very basic. It's a very basic script.
So so it's even planning down to those details, right? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna cold call 1 person tomorrow for this XYZ event from my office at whatever time in the morning that is. Like do you see what I'm doing, everyone? That it's drilling down to those specifics, like if we weren't going to get specific enough, right? And this is only part of Christy's goal, right? So it starts to define what our to-do list is because it's all being driven by our why, but then we start to get down to the finite details. And so the steps can be as little as possible, or to be able to continue to take bigger actions. The thing that I caution about bigger actions is that sometimes they require what I call reverse engineering, right? Christy, you obviously know that the beginning steps tomorrow, if you're able to connect with them on the event, but they're not able to attend the event, that you would probably be like, can I follow up with you at a later time so that you could continue to solicit that relationship or build that relationship to potentially do business in the future, right? So it's having all of those kind of actions planned out or reverse engineer instead of just the one big goal of I'm just going to cold call, right? That makes sense?
Everything has a plan of action. I have a script for
awesome.
Basically each tier of business I'm looking for.
That's
and
great.
The value add. It's a with them. It's what's in it for them.
Yeah.
Or not me, or that wasn't the correct acronym, but it's something for them, not just for me.
Yeah, and I knew what you meant.
Okay, yeah, it's like, wait, that's singular. Yeah, I meant the other person. Okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, what you would need to do is then if I would create that kind of specific funnel of a plan for what your Wednesdays, Thursdays look like going forward, and detail of what those plans look like in that 60 minutes of time. There is a great book called 10X by Grant Cardone. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Like TEN?
No,
X?
the number 10 and
Yes.
the letter X.
And I'm sorry, it was by who?
Grant, and his last name is Cardone.
Okay.
And he is like a sales guru, okay? But he talks about 10 times action, 10 times the action. And so he says, if you think that you can get 6 calls done in an hour, go for 12, go for 60. Like he would be talking like massive numbers. And it's because, remember when I talked to you guys about at the very beginning of this workshop, that sometimes we minimize our goals so that we just hit good enough instead of stretching ourselves. So even Christy, if you planned on, you know, in an hour time, I'm going to do 10 calls and you only got 8 done. Awesome. Celebrate the 8, right? That you aim for 10, so that you're constantly stretching yourself to be able to go through your script as efficiently as possible, because you know as well as I do that you've got this very small window of when people actually listen to you and when they start tuning you out.
About 10 seconds to capture them.
Absolutely. And then be able to continue on so that you're being as most efficient with your time as well, right? Awesome. Thank you so much, Christy. I appreciate that. Awesome. Anybody else got questions around how to be able to drill down to the plan of their number 1? Okay, so I'm going to put these up because these might help you. So this is about the 4 questions. Oh, sorry, ignore number 4. It's not supposed to say this afternoon. That's next week. That's about the obstacles. Okay, so the first one that, you know, what do I really want? What is my outcome that I'm trying to achieve? And to get really absolutely clear on what that looks like. Why do I want it? Get emotionally connected to your goal, right? That passion's going to drive Christy to behave differently than if she didn't feel passion at all. She's not excited about her business. It's not going to work that way, right? And like I suggested, putting together a why statement for yourself. And then what massive action will I take to create a craving? So remember we talked about habit loops, like what massive action can I do to create a craving and celebrate it every step? Excuse me. And it doesn't have to start with, this miraculous step. It's just what's the first step? So not too big, but something that's doable. And then to be able to commit to it. So when will you do it? Be very specific. Time, date, location, just like we did with Christy. How will you do it? So she's using the scripts, right? To be able to narrow down. Then what's the first next step that you'll take, right? So Christy's got some time blocked off in her calendar. Her next step that she's going to take is to get really specific about, maybe it's taking names off of that 70-person list or the different categories and slotting them into that hour time slot. So she knows exactly who she's calling at what time, what her goal is of wanting to be able to accomplish those cold calls. I just want to mention in here too is that sometimes people ask me about how do I build in the accountability? And so, Christy, I'm not putting you on the spot because I love you. But tomorrow I'm at BNI with Christy. So I'm going to ask Christy, how did the phone call go, right? You can build in accountability into your planning, right? But I have a word about accountability partners. Do not make your spouse or your partner your accountability partner. Do not make your mom. So my mom is not my accountability partner, even though I think sometimes she would like to be. My mom's on the call, so I'm allowed to say that. Because it's a lot of pressure, and I'll relate this to when I quit smoking is that, Christopher and Kyle had talked to me about taking an accountability partner. Well, automatically I thought, well, I'm going to take Honor. But if I'm being really honest, I know how to manipulate Honor. and honors my spouse. I know how to do that. I know how to get my own way. And so I'm not setting myself up for success by having my spouse as my accountability partner. I just know how to work it, and he caves because he's a nice guy. So we don't use our family because, once again, that's a lot of pressure to put on my children. It's a lot of pressure. And my mom probably remembers from my adolescence when I blamed her for everything, right? So wouldn't want to do that to my mom again. So accountability partners, I talk to a lot to people about water seeks its own level. So go to your strength. Go your strength. My accountability partner for quitting smoking was Kyle and Christopher. They're my strength. It was also that nothing like having to go be like, I smoked, right? Like I didn't want to do that. It was embarrassing enough that I did. I was embarrassed enough that they knew that it was something that I knew I could stay accountable with having those two as my accountability partners. I have a weekly call once a week where I check in with one of my mentors, and she is around the positive scripting. I've got lots of goals around self-care and about taking care of myself, allowing or giving myself permission to take time, giving myself permission to reward myself, and make sure that I'm being taken care of too. So I talk to my accountability partner once a week, and she checks in with me. What did you do today? What was the action that you took? What's the action that you're taking next week? And we get really specific and be able to mutually hold each other accountable to those goals. So accountability partners, find your strength. So anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Like I said, next week, we're really going to talk about obstacles, because I know that there was some people that right at the very beginning of this had asked me, Carrie, I don't have enough time. Time is my challenge. I have no time to get my goals done. That's why they don't get done. Well, I'm going to help you with your time challenge. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. So, and getting down to what some solutions are. Okay, so homework this week is twofold, and this is why I still want to be able to go through some of this. I want you to be able to take your number one from your list at a minimum. I would like you to do this with all top 5, but at a minimum over the next week, start to build your pathway of your number one. Ask yourself what's next. What's the next step? And continue on with the next step of your pathway from now until your next evaluation period. So Christy, it might be that you want to review after, a couple of weeks. How's it going? Maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's a month because you're following up with them for 30 days. Once a month, about being able to take that opportunity to follow up and see how are you tracking. Is that habit sticking? Are you being able to follow through with your plan? What's your takeaways? Are people answering? Do you need to tweak something in your plan? Do you need to tweak the times, like you said? Is it the timing of the day that you're calling that you need to be able to follow up at different times? Or what does that look like? And so Christy's going to plan all of those steps around cold calling from tomorrow morning all the way from 1 month's time out, so that she knows exactly on any given day, at any point during the week, where she's at with that goal, and then she's going to reevaluate it in a month. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. And then this is the other part that I want you to be able to come up with. So as you're going through your top 5, ideally, but at the minimum, your top 1 plan, when you reach roadblocks about the, oh, what if, or, oh, I don't know about that, or, Christy, you had talked about, Mondays and Fridays in your industry are out the window. Tuesdays are kind of a write-off for you too, right? But what happens if all of a sudden your Wednesdays go out the window, right? So just keep a sidebar kind of list of those obstacles that you start to think of that come up, and bring that list to next week's session so that we can explore them. let's do a group think of what those solutions are. Make sense to everybody? Okay. Does anybody looking at your number ones right now, thinking I have no idea what my next step is with that? Does anybody have that?
Hi, Carrie, I do.
Okay. So what's your number one, Michelle?
That's the problem.
You don't have a number one?
No, and I don't want to go backwards because everybody's already identified their number one.
No, that's okay though.
But I feel like, 3 or 5 of them could potentially be the number one.
Okay. And so you could relate to when I had talked about the tie situation, that there's a couple of them that are pretty neck and neck, pretty close to one another.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So is it, when you think about that list, what happens if you stepped away from it to be able to observe it from a different way? And so what I mean is, I've been saying a lot about get emotional. So try something different. Don't get emotional about it. Just look at it from a really logic standpoint. Which one comes first? Does that help at all? Because sometimes I can overanalyze, right? I can look at the same list over and over and continue to talk myself into confusion. And so if I take a step back and I just go with logically what makes sense, I can sometimes sort out what numerical order they're supposed to come in. The other thing, Michelle, is just put them in an order and go with it. And in a couple of days' time, go back and review your list. And if that order doesn't make sense, change the order up. See if that order makes sense. So we had talked about, when we talked about habits, we had talked about experimenting with those rewards. Experiment with your list too. Because I think that there is some caution that you can get stuck in analysis paralysis of trying to be able to, for sure, this is my top 5. And it doesn't need to be the for sure yet. Keep experimenting and see what clicks, and you'll know. And I think that's what I meant by self-honesty. You'll know when that list is numerically ordered the way that it needs to be for you, right? So,
okay.
So I would spend some time on that, and then for the next week, Michelle, and I would say, Michelle, if you're still like, I have no idea, Carrie, what the heck is going on. If you're like that by Wednesday, give me a call and let's work it through. But I just want you to spend some time observing it from a different angle and see if you can come up with what that list looks like. And then
because sorry.
No.
Yeah, because I think you got categories, the personal and work and business, and
yeah,
I just find lack of motivation.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah.
And there's not a big enough driving force to get behind it.
Yeah. And sometimes, you need to, it's about a fine balance, right? So what it sounds like to me is that, and I don't know if this is right or not, Michelle, but when I got stuck, and I had competing priorities and I had competing kind of goals with one another, it's because I had some shoulds in there of stuff that I thought that I should have on there, because it, I'm a life coach, that should be on there. I'm a mom, that should be on there. And it was, I had some guilt and I had some emotions around not having it all on there. That it just wasn't where my heart was. It wasn't where my motivation was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, nope, I got some. There we go. So I would just sit and observe it differently, see if something budges for you. And like I said, if you don't have it by Wednesday, give me a call and I can work through your list with you. And then regardless though, we're going to take one of those goals and be able to start to do the planning around it, Michelle, so that you get the.
And maybe that's probably where I'll start, Carrie, too, is just take one and go with it. Because I think, you know, I've met some milestones with my work, and some of my colleagues have said, you know, you're top in sales, you're top in this. Like, where do you go next?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
You've accomplished.
Yeah,
you know?
No, for sure. I used to have, I had this problem in my corporate role of like, how do I do better than the best last year? Like, I don't know what else you want me to do. So I felt like I was inventing goals. And, you know, the way that I worked in my corporate role, a lot of that had become habitual behavior. It was just kind of the way that I worked, right? So I didn't have to take a narrow focus. What I needed to take a more of a narrowed focus in my goal planning was the stuff that I wasn't successful in, the stuff that I wasn't working, the stuff that didn't come second nature, right? You know, I think that when we get really proficient with certain behaviors that lead us to success, it's time to now take that skill set that you've done so well in sales and be able to transfer that skill set to the other areas of your life that might have more of the gaps in it. So that's another way that you can take a look at it too, to see if, you know, do you really need to have a business goal on there? Like, especially if you've been consistently performing and like you said, you're the top of the top, like what other goal are you going to put up there? So that's kind of the.
That sounds kind of arrogant, actually. Sorry about that.
No. I understand it. I totally do. Because like I said, I reached a glass ceiling in my corporate role. I got to that point too, where it was like, I don't know how to be, and it's not arrogant. It just is what it is. How do I get better than being the best? You know, so I get it.
But I like that idea. You know, it's interesting. I'm going to reflect on that, because to transfer some of those behaviors that I don't even think I'm aware of.
Yeah.
In a lot of respects.
Yeah.
And put them into another capacity in my life.
Yeah. It's a lot of the work that I do with my clients is it's not really that I teach new concepts. Like, we've all heard these concepts before. They're not really new or revolutionary. It's just applying them in a different way. It's just, it literally is about reminding us about, oh, right, I know how to do this. You know, I have some people come forward and say, you know, I need to work on perseverance, right? And I you know, I need to work on being able to persevere through my personal life, but they've had extremely successful careers. We don't get a successful career by not being able to persevere. So it's taking that perseverance skills that they had applied to their career and putting it into their personal life. So another way to look at things. So awesome. Thanks, Michelle, though. I'm glad that you
thank you.
asked a question. So
thank you.
Like I said, no problems. Anybody else have any questions about homework, about anything that they want clarity on? Okay, so this week I want to make sure that just like I offered for Michelle, that everybody else knows, if you get stuck throughout the week, by all means, post a comment, post a question on Facebook. You guys get bombarded with all of my emails that I know that you love, but my phone number is on my signature line. By all means, reach out, ask for help, and ask questions that you've got. This was part of, you know, the 6-week series was to be able to have access to not only myself, but to Christopher Lawrence and to Kyle Kalu, to be able to ask those questions and really start to gain traction on what your planning is for your goals, to get you real results this year, right? That was the concept of this. So with that, there's a live Q&A again on Thursday. So I can't tell you who my mystery special guest is this week, but it might be Christopher. Just might be Christopher. So I will be in and out of the group tonight if you've got any other questions. And if not, then we will see you guys all in one way or another on Thursday. Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. Have yourself a great night.